There are moments in history when something appears that does not fit, something that refuses to align with the patterns we expect from human progress. The story of writing, for instance, is often told as a steady evolution. Symbols become sounds. Sounds become language. Language becomes literature. It is a sequence that feels almost inevitable. But what if that sequence is incomplete? What if, buried deep within one of the world's earliest civilizations, there exists a system of writing that defies not only translation but understanding itself? In the ancient cities of the Indus Valley, thousands of small inscriptions have been uncovered. They are brief, compact, repeated across seals, tablets, pottery, and tools. And yet, despite decades of effort, they remain undeciphered, not partially understood, not debated in meaning, entirely unread. And this is where the contradiction begins. If writing is meant to communicate, then what does it mean when a script survives without a voice? What if an entire civilization once spoke in symbols we can see, but can never hear again? The Indus Valley Civilization flourished between approximately 2600 and 1900 BCE, stretching across what is now modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. It was vast, sophisticated, and remarkably organized. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reveal an urban landscape of planned streets, advanced drainage systems, standardized brick construction, and evidence of long-distance trade. This was not a primitive society experimenting with survival. It was a structured world, operating with precision and intent. Conventional understanding places the Indus Valley alongside ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia as one of the earliest cradles of civilization. And like those civilizations, it appears to have developed a system of writing. But here, the comparison begins to fracture. Egypt left behind hieroglyphs, carved into temples and preserved on papyrus. Mesopotamia left cuneiform, pressed into clay tablets that record everything from trade transactions to epic literature. Both systems were eventually deciphered, revealing not only their language but their worldview. The Indus Valley, however, offers no such clarity. Instead, we find sequences of symbols, often no more than 5 or 6 characters long, etched into stone seals and other artifacts. There are no long inscriptions, no bilingual texts, no clear equivalents to a Rosetta Stone, just fragments. And this is where the unsettling part emerges. If this was a fully developed civilization, with trade networks, governance, and social organization, then where is its voice? Where are its stories, its laws, its records? The mystery begins in the early 20th century, during the period of British colonial rule in the Indian subcontinent. Archaeological surveys had long hinted at ancient ruins in the region, but it was not until the 1920s that systematic excavations began to reveal the scale of what lay beneath. At Harappa, in present-day Punjab, workers had been unknowingly dismantling ancient bricks for use in railway construction. When archaeologists arrived, they uncovered the remains of a city far older than expected. Soon after, at Mohenjo-Daro, another site emerged, larger, more complex, and remarkably well-preserved beneath layers of silt. Among the discoveries were small, square seals, typically made of steatite. Each seal bore an image, often an animal, such as a bull, elephant, or a creature that defies easy identification, and above the image, a line of symbols. These symbols were precise, deliberate, and consistent in form. At first glance, they seemed to resemble writing systems already known. But as more seals were uncovered, a pattern emerged that was both intriguing and limiting. The inscriptions were short, almost always short, rarely exceeding a handful of characters. And yet, they appeared everywhere. The environment in which these objects were found adds to the quiet tension of their presence. Buried beneath centuries of sediment, preserved in the silence of collapsed walls and abandoned streets, these seals seem almost untouched by time. Their surfaces remain sharp, their engravings exact. It is as if they were waiting, not to be found, but to be questioned. And so the questions began. The physical evidence is both substantial and elusive. Over 4,000 inscribed objects have been documented, with around 400 distinct symbols identified. These symbols are not random. They follow patterns. Some appear frequently at the beginning of inscriptions, others at the end. There is a sense of structure, perhaps even grammar. Radiocarbon dating and stratigraphic analysis place these artifacts firmly within the mature phase of the Indus Valley Civilization. The materials vary: stone, copper, terracotta, but the script remains consistent across regions and time. Measurements of the seals reveal standardization, suggesting controlled production. The symbols themselves are often carefully aligned, indicating that their placement was not decorative, but meaningful. And yet, meaning remains just beyond reach. Academic interpretation has approached the script from multiple angles. Some scholars argue that it represents a logosyllabic system, similar to early Sumerian writing. Others suggest it may be logosyllabic but simplified, or even purely logographic. There are attempts to link it to Dravidian languages, based on linguistic patterns and regional continuity. Computational analyses have examined symbol frequency, sequence patterns, and positional constraints. And still, no definitive decipherment has emerged. This is not due to lack of effort. It is due to absence of context. There is no known bilingual inscription to serve as a key. No long texts to establish narrative structure. No surviving descendants of the script that can bridge the gap. The Indus script exists in isolation, complete in form, but detached from interpretation. History does not break easily. But here, it bends. The debate over the nature of the script continues to divide scholars. The mainstream view maintains that it is indeed a form of writing, one that encoded language, perhaps for administrative or ritual purposes. The consistency of symbols, their distribution, and their structured arrangement all suggest intentional communication. But here is where the discussion becomes more complex. An alternative perspective proposes that the Indus symbols may not represent language in the conventional sense. Some researchers argue that they function more like symbols of identity, markers of clans, ownership, or status, rather than phonetic or semantic units. In this view, the script is not a script at all, but a system of non-linguistic signs. This interpretation is not without controversy. Critics point to the structured nature of the inscriptions, the repetition of sequences, and the statistical patterns that resemble known writing systems. They argue that dismissing the script as non-linguistic underestimates the sophistication of the civilization that produced it. And yet, the brevity of the inscriptions remains a persistent challenge. Most known writing systems, especially those used for complex societies, produce longer texts, records, narratives, instructions. The Indus script does not, and this is where the contradiction deepens. A civilization capable of urban planning, standardized weights and measures, and extensive trade networks would presumably require a robust system of communication. But the evidence we have does not reflect that expectation. Unless the evidence is incomplete, it is possible that the primary medium of writing, if it existed, has not survived. Perishable materials such as palm leaves, cloth, or wood may have carried longer texts, now lost to time. What remains then are the durable fragments, the seals, the inscriptions on pottery offering only a glimpse of a larger system. Or perhaps the script served a different function altogether. Trade seals, for instance, may not require lengthy text. A few symbols could convey identity, origin, or authority. In such a system, brevity would not be a limitation, but a necessity. Still, the absence of decipherment leaves all interpretation suspended. This is not myth. This is stone. Modern technology has brought new tools to the investigation. Machine learning algorithms analyze symbol patterns, searching for underlying structure. Statistical models compare the script to known linguistic systems. Yet, without a clear reference point, even the most advanced methods encounter the same barrier. The script does not yield. And so, the Indus Valley remains a civilization that can be seen, measured, and mapped, but not fully heard. There is a silence embedded in its artifacts. A silence that is not empty, but dense with meaning. Each symbol carries intent, but that intent remains locked within a system we cannot access. And perhaps that is the most unsettling aspect of all. We often assume that knowledge, once discovered, becomes permanent. That the past, once uncovered, becomes understandable. But the Indus script challenges that assumption. It suggests that there are limits, not only to what we know, but to what we can know. The cities of the Indus Valley eventually declined, their populations dispersing, their structures falling into ruin. The reasons remain debated: climate change, shifting river systems, economic transformation. But the script did not evolve into something recognizable. It did not leave a descendant. It simply stopped. And with it, an entire mode of expression vanished. What remains are these fragments, precise, deliberate, and silent. Perhaps one day a breakthrough will occur. A new discovery, a missing link, a moment when the symbols begin to speak. But until then, they exist in a space between presence and absence. Visible, but unreadable. Known, but not understood. And in that space, history does not disappear. It lingers, waiting,